Hello and welcome to the Xtra Edge, the sports analytics podcast powered by KINEXON Sports. Like and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite or all platforms where podcasts are available. You'll find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and many more. Or you can follow us on social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, to stay up to date with the latest in sports performance, technology, and innovation. My name is Lienemann, and I'm the product marketing manager club business here at KINEXON, and I will be your host for today's podcast. I'm very much looking forward to my conversation now today with Sebastiano Cencini, who is the head physiotherapist at the Italian women's volleyball club, Savino del Bene Scandicci. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Thank you, Sebastiano, for joining us today. How are you doing? And most importantly, how's the summer in Italy treating you?
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and spend some time talking about a few things regarding volleyball and sports tech. So in Italy here we have a very nice weather, so everything is going right.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I can't say that necessarily about Brooklyn, New York. It's hot and humid in the summer, so I wish I could be in Italy as well. It's probably much nicer, much better food and wine.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I would love to be there. Maybe to start us to kick us off. As always in the podcast, we want to learn more about our different customers, our partners around the world, and how you're working with the data, with KINEXON itself, but also learning more about the field you're operating in, the sports you're working with. So if you could give us a little bit more of your background, we obviously heard your name already, but if you can tell us a little bit more about the club you work in, kind of like your journey so far. Over the last couple of years, how you got to Scandicci, but also into volleyball as well. In the pre-conversation, you mentioned to me you love basketball as well. So would love to hear kind of like a little bit more about your journey, how you got into the sport, where you are today, to kick us off.
Yes, I'm an Italian physiotherapist, 39 years old, and it's more or less 15 years that I work with professional sports. So once I graduated in physical therapist, I decided to follow my mentor, and I started to work with men's volleyball team with a club. And after that, a number of opportunities happened just staying next to him. And I never stopped to say thank you to Davide, who is the name of my mentor, of course. And after 3 years with men's volleyball club, we had the opportunity to share an amazing experience, which is already on with the Italian men's volleyball national team. So I had the pleasure, the honor, the amazing opportunity to taking part of 3 Olympics games in Rio, Tokyo, and Paris with the men's team. And I had a little break from volleyball between, I would say 2012, yes, around maybe 7-8 years ago. I had an experience with professional basketball here in Italy with a very important basketball team. The name is Montepaschi Siena, is based in Siena, of course, and I had the privilege to take part of the Italian championship, of course, but the most important part was the EuroLeague, which is an amazing competition, which is an amazing league. And so I had the opportunity to work with the senior professional basketball players, and at the same time with young players, with the entire junior section of the team. Once I finished with basketball, I get back with the volleyball team, and the next one will be my 5th season with the Savino del Bene Scandicci, which is a very important volleyball team, female volleyball team. So And from university background, I had my Bachelor of Science here in Siena. Then I completed my is a clinical master in sports physiotherapy, and then I had my Master of Science, which is a more managing oriented than clinical or sports medicine oriented.
Yeah, so wide background and experience that we're hearing from. So a lot to learn. I'm looking forward to dive a little bit more into the conversation around the Olympic Games, how the summer treated you there. And also, maybe let's start with that question right away, because I'm coming from the basketball world. So who is actually jumping higher, the volleyball players or the basketball players?
Volleyball. It depends, but the volleyball are able to do amazing jumps.
Yeah, so they probably could do a dunk very, very easily as well.
Yes.
Maybe not as fancy, but they jump very high.
Yeah.
I would love to talk a little bit about the different sport-specific requirements and maybe also some differences that you saw there for the different sports, also to provide some perspective for our audience and how that evolved. I'm curious, let's dive right into that. You mentioned you've been around the 3 different Olympics in Rio, London, and then most recently in Paris, right? Those 3?
Rio, Tokyo, and Paris.
Rio, Tokyo, and Paris, not long. Okay. So for the last 3 Olympics, in our pre-conversation to this podcast, you mentioned there's a lot of tournaments that you're playing. You have a Nations League, you have the Continental Championship, so the European Championship, the World Cup, the Olympics. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of like what your current situation looks like? I think you also mentioned you're coming up on the preseason now in a couple days, 2 weeks, 10 days. So what does your summer typically look like from a scheduling perspective? When do you have the players available? And kind of like tell us a little bit more about those circumstances.
This is a very nice question. So the scenario is quite complex, because as head physiotherapist of Savino de Bene Scandicci, I have to take care about many things, because the regular season generally starts in October and finish in late April or early May. And I mean, the regular season here in Europe is made by, of course, it depends by the team generally. I mean, our team compete on the Italian volleyball championship and at the same time on the Champions League. So this means that we play 3 games per week. I will say every week, because when we don't play the Champions League, okay, so we don't travel around Europe, we have the Italian league. So at least 3 games per week. What happened when the season finish? We start another part of the season, which is of course, the off season, which is quite unique, because if you are a player who is involved with the national team, you have the opportunity to compete at least on 2 different tournaments, the Volleyball Nations League and the Continental or the World Championship. But if you are not involved with the national team, your off-season is quite longer, because it takes at least 3 to 4 months. And of course, we face a very, very, very different scenario from every player, because even if we even if we try to having the most important numbers about the training load, how is the player, where they are, and all the stuff, I would say it's very, very tough to keep everything under control, because the different teams doing different things, doing different training load monitoring activities. So it's very, very tough to be, all year long, I would say, in touch with the player, even because you, as a club, every year you change at least 3, 4, 5, 6 players. So players come, players go. So it's tough to everything under control. And which is the most challenging situation is having a plan for every player. Because you can have injury during the national team, you can have injury during the off season. The player used to go on vacation, so they don't have all the stuff to keep their shape. So it's challenging.
Yeah, no, definitely. What would you say for maybe kind of like the worst case scenario for some of your national team players? How many games in a season where you obviously at the regular season you mentioned the Champions
League,
season,
but then we played 42 games last season.
And then plus the Champions League and international competition, how many games?
Around I would say it depends by the player, but around 70 to 80 per year.
Okay, that's a lot of games. And then in our pre-conversation, you also mentioned, so usually if you have an Olympic year. So for example, last year you mentioned also the upcoming Olympics here in LA in 2028. You're essentially ending the season, from what I understood, or the regular season. Then you're jumping in the early summer right into the Nations League. Then you have the Olympics midsummer, and then you have the World Cup, I believe, or like the Continental Cup in the late summer. What do you think about that? Like, how do you feel from your perspective for the players, or like also what's your perspective on that as a head physiotherapist? Kind of like, where do you see the biggest challenge, maybe with how many days they have time off in between, and how do you manage that?
So together with the club, we try to provide at least 1 week off between, every step. So by the end of the regular season and the beginning of the national team, the players used to have at least 1 week between the 2 tournaments of the national team activity, of course, and then at least 1 week off by the end of the national team activity and the club, the club activity beginning. And it's hard because athletes are first of all person, and I've seen many times athletes really, really from a psychological point of view, from physical point of view. So their body need the recovery, but at the same time their mind need the recovery. So it's not easy for them. I think they need to be prepared to be very important or top athletes. That's the key point.
Yeah, and this is a great transition. I feel like speaking of preparation and being prepared, obviously every athlete is responsible and needs to be held accountable to their own fitness stage, right? So they need to prepare themselves, stay physically in shape, get the right nutrition in, get a good night's sleep. There's probably not too much time for partying unless you win the Olympics and or the World Cup or anything. So you kind of like need to stay dialed in over the off season. But I always say, like, if you want to prepare for something, you also need to measure what you're doing, or kind of like keep track of what you're doing. So you know your current fitness state. And and then you can either improve it, make any adjustments to it. How, during the summer with the challenges that you just mentioned, how do you do that? Are there like, I mean, you said yourself, you also work with the national team at some point. So in those cases, I would imagine if you work national team and the club teams, it's a little bit easier with the transparency between the people that are involved and kind of like staying on top of the players that you also work with at the club level. But what is the Italian national team, for example, doing, or what are other national teams doing while the players are gone? Are you in contact with those physiotherapists or athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches as well? Or kind of like, how do you kind of like keep tab on what they are doing and how they physically prepare them and work with them during the summer so that you have the most information as they come back and kind of like work with them? Because obviously they're not taking the KINEXON system with them. Like how do you keep track of all of that and how everyone evolves over those 4 or 5 months of the
yes, we try to raise the level of communication. So as a club, generally, I used to talk with the national team physio, and at the same time, our doctor with the national team doctor, and the strength conditioning coach with the strength conditioning coach of the national team. And we try to, of course, we try to collect all the information regarding the athlete, but at the same time, we like to have a conversation or meeting with the athlete, or online or in person if we have the opportunity in the middle of the summer. So just like this.
Got it. And so obviously you guys are using KINEXON, working with the system there at the club level. What's your experience also on the national level? Is sport tech very much part of what you're doing in volleyball generally with the national teams and on the different club levels? So does everyone have something to actually keep track of the players, or would you say it's a rather new thing for most volleyball teams to actually collect data and inform more decisions and provide provide an objective perspective also to kind of like the subjective coach's view?
Yes, I tell you these very practical tips. So at the beginning of the season, when we start the new journey with the player, we used to have like an history paper where we collect all the information provided by the player. Since we started to use KINEXON, we added a line which is like a picture of the training load parameters, because we know that not every team have KINEXON, of course, but there are a few important volleyball teams who have KINEXON on board. So we ask for the training report, or just if the players knows a few values about the training load feature, get the very personal training load feature. And these pieces of information are part of our history, because this is the starting point where me and the strength conditioning coach, we try to focus and we try to reflect in order to increase gradually the load, managing the load, thinking about a very personalized beginning of the season and all the stuff, but in a very, very individualized approach.
And let's say you have somebody that joins the team, you don't have any data on them yet. Is there like any testing or kind of like any initial assessment that you're doing also with the system to say like, hey, we'll typically have a couple of drills or type of scenarios that we run them through to collect kind of like a initial baseline for some of the players that you get?
This is a very, very nice question. We don't have, And if a new player arrives, we used to observe for at least 15 to 20 days in order to trying to understand, because if the player is very athletics, and also because we have our personal database. So we had the opportunity to saw the players and having the data next to the players. So if the player is very physical, is so athletics, we knew from the past, of course, if we had a very athletics player, what are the scores? And this is so important for us to having an initial idea of the features of the athletes. Of course, my point of view is more medical point of view. I'm more health oriented and not only performance oriented. But this is, I think, crucial in this period for volleyball.
Yeah, I very much like that approach, kind of like bringing, you mentioned obviously the strength conditioning approach, the health aspect as a head physiotherapist, but then also the data aspect and kind of like building an overarching player profile that has different data sources. So KINEXON, but then also different functional tests maybe and different things that you're assessing to kind of like get a broader picture of what the athlete looks like when they arrive, and then kind of like also how they develop. What do you think would be the biggest challenge for you in volleyball with implementing the technology, I guess? Do you see a lot of players being hesitant about using wearable technology and collecting that additional data? Is that something that they need some guidance on, some explanation? Like, how do you manage that transition? How do you communicate with the players? And what kind of challenges do you maybe see with implementing that?
It depends. We used to push the positive side of know and taking information in order to protect the player and inform and the coaches about the situation and about what the player can do or what happened. And I would say that I think now, even though national teams, volleyball teams are growing up from sport technology point of view, there are not so many players that are used to work together with data. And we used to have a very, day by day talk about how was the practice, how was the jumps, how was the accumulated acceleration load, in order to talk about the data. Data is not only a bad thing to see, to talk, to discuss. No, it's part of our daily routine. So the more we talk, the more is normal for the players and for the coaches.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think this is also something I've seen with other sports. Obviously, creating the buy-in comes through education, talking about the data. What are we doing with it? Do you also see like this is something that I've been hearing a lot? So curious about your experience in that realm. Do you have the feeling that a lot of players also are concerned about, could the data be used against me? You obviously already said hey, we're collecting this to help you to extend your career, to keep you healthy and playing. But have you seen that in volleyball too, that players are like, I'm not sure if I want my data collected? Is it used in negotiations?
Yes. Yes, sometimes. Yes, sometimes. But the majority of the times, my experience is that they are facing something brand new. So they need to know, they need to explore, they want to understand, they want to know the why we collect data and what data we collect, and that's it. I think the education point of view is the most important part of having on board with the team a system like KINEXON.
Yeah, no, I love that. Is that something that you do in a formal way also with the team at the beginning of the season? You obviously mentioned you have individual conversations with players, but I mean, you mentioned it like in 10 days, you start in preseason again with the team. Is that something, especially for the new players, also at the beginning of the season, where you bring everyone together and it's kind of like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, where you kind of like give a presentation from that perspective as well to give everyone kind of like a baseline understanding of like, hey, this is our approach at Scandicci, or like how do you manage that?
No, I mean, at the very beginning of the season, we try to, we have a plan from the strength conditioning coach and the head coach, of course. So we use KINEXON to double check if the plan is well done. And quite often I spoke with a few colleagues, so the data are seen only like the devil. So the data say this, so we need to stop. And from my point of view, this is, it's wrong, because we have the opportunity to use data to gradually increase the load in order to avoiding the load spiking, which can be, in my experience, dangerous for the female athlete.
Yeah, so that goes right into that aspect of data informed versus data driven, I think is what you're referring to. So yeah, very much love that approach as well. So using the data to inform decisions, right? Having data as like a supplemental aspect that helps you make better decision rather than the data making the decision for you. So always coming back to kind of like the coach's perspective or coach's eye, and trusting kind of like your gut also with like the decisions that you're making. Now, so definitely love that. And is that something also, going back to my previous question again, maybe I phrased that wrong, but at the beginning of the season, are you explaining that to the players and at the team meeting essentially to explain your approach, like how and why you're doing it? And then also, are you kind of like diving deeper into these are the different things that we are collecting from you over the course of the season?
Yeah, we don't do a team meeting. We do personal chat with, individual talk with the player, because we have a player who is on board with us since 3 years, so they know everything about that. So they ask something new on that also. It's rare. No, everything is okay. So keep going. Yes, very easy, and in a very easy way, very easy talk, very clear. Not too many numbers, not too many pieces of information. Easy and open to be consulted whenever you want. If we are away, if we are at home, whenever, it's open. It's not a secret.
Yeah. So are you also in that sense then sharing the data with the players individually, or is that more based on a request level? So are players coming to you to kind of like get individual data, or are you proactively sharing with them as well?
We used to work with more with requests. So sometimes player come to me or to the strength conditioning coach and ask, can I see last game? Can I see last week? What about the height? What about the different parameters? So yes, it's different what we do with the head coach, of course, in a very proactive way. So we have, KINEXON provide the amazing experience with the software. So we have our reports, so it's easy to print or via PDF, and we show to the coach what are the point where we need to adjust something, or we can reduce, or we have the opportunity to push a little bit more.
Hmm. Yeah, let's dive right into that a little bit more as well as you mentioned that. What are kind of like the reports, or maybe what are also some of the metrics, if you're even communicating any of the metrics in that sense, or if you provide more like an executive summary for the coach, what are the things that you're looking in specifically with your team, but then also what are the things that you're communicating to coach? Are you providing them with a report? Are you more providing a summary for him? Are you talking about specific metrics? What does that kind of like look for you?
Yes, we provide a summary. We
Okay.
provide a summary, and so we first analyze the data, and then we see if there's something connected to what we have to say to the head coach, but in a very, very easy and quick way. So easy. And of course, if we have a problem, or if we have an injury and we need more time to make the plan, to present the plan, to show what's going on, what's wrong. So of course, we need extra time. We ask for extra time.
Yeah. And what are some of the metrics, if you can share that, if it's not confidential?
Yeah. So
what are some of the metrics you're looking at?
We daily collect the jump, the number of jumps, the jump height, and the accumulated acceleration load. And last but not the least, the duration. Because in Italy, with volleyball, we have the opportunity to keep the best on during practices and games. So we have all the data. We have all the data about the games, about the practices, everything.
It's always glad to hear that, because that's unfortunately not the case in every sport, or even within different sports, it's different, looking at different competitions, right? I think if you look at the EuroLeague, I think just might have changed that as well, but I know they didn't really work there. In national competitions, it's usually different. If you're looking at the NBA, for example, if you look at basketball here, or the college basketball, it's different how it's handled between practice and games. But what would you say is the biggest difference in volleyball in terms of like what data you're seeing in a game compared to a practice? Where do you think really those sport-specific or game-specific demands come in, where you say like, okay, this only happens in a game compared to compared to practice?
So the accumulated acceleration load is the marker of the how much tough was the game. Because jumps, more or less, it depends by the number of sets the player played. The duration, of course, it depends. So the rules of volleyball. You can have a game of 1 hour 15, or you can have a 2 hour and a half game. So, but this is unpredictable. So, but the accumulated acceleration load is the marker of the game.
Okay, so you're looking at the total volume essentially of like the entire workload. That you have.
But also if you dive into the accumulated acceleration load per minute, you are able to see the intensity of the games.
Yeah. What would you say is again, like, and maybe also you can draw from a comparison in basketball, but what would you say are kind of like the most demanding scenarios in volleyball? Maybe if you want to compare it also to basketball, but what are the most demanding scenarios that you see in volleyball? Are there certain time durations in a game where you say like, maybe we have a rally that goes on for like 2 minutes? Those are the most high intensity, most demanding scenarios. Like, how would you describe that in volleyball? And like, kind of what are you seeing there in the data?
Yes, of course, a very long rally is so demanding for the players. But if you think about what I told you at the beginning of our talk, we have the opportunity to play 3 games per week. So, and you don't know, you cannot adjust the score considering your schedule or what's it's easier for you. And the worst scenario, without any doubt, is having three very long games. Can be 2 hours and a half. And this is so demanding for the player. So they need, you see that they need time to recover. And quite often they don't have time to complete recovery.
Yeah. Is it how, like coming out of a week like that, how do you manage that? I remember working with some of the NBA teams here in the US. They always had this mode where post-game they divided the group into like a low minute and a high minute group. So everyone that was like in a high minute group would play, whoever was in a high minute group who played a lot would kind of like just go through some medical, do some stretching, maybe a little bit lifting the next day. So very light work, obviously get the recovery in. But then also the players that didn't play as much, they would kind of like have a replacement practice, if you want. So would play against the coaches to get the equivalent load in the next day. Kind of like, how do you manage that in volleyball with your team coming out of a strenuous week that you just described?
More or less the same. So of course, different roles, different situations. So if a player don't play, of course, the next day, for example, game on Sunday, the players that don't play on Monday, game on Sunday. On Monday, the player who haven't played on Monday, they practice. And it depends by the age or by the role. We have the opportunity to decide with jumps or without jumps. And of course, it depends by the role. And the day after, we have a team practice generally with plus weights, and then we are ready for the second game. Day off after in the middle of the week, and then we restart. But we try to personalize a few spots during the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were just referring to the jumps again. I'm wondering also with the data, and you mentioned earlier you're looking at accumulated acceleration load, obviously jumps per minute. Do you see a relationship between the accumulated acceleration load and the jumps for practices compared also to games? Because you said sometimes we're not doing any jumps to kind of like keep the load on the bones and the joints and everything lower for them to recover. Obviously, I would imagine that is probably the biggest portion of the load. But then also you said like position specific, there might be differences between the total load, since that's or like accumulated acceleration load, collecting everything we're doing, so also the running and getting into position, versus like the jump, maybe just collecting that portion of the activity. How do you see that relationship and how it affects like different decisions that you're making?
So it's funny that the libero role. The libero, so is the only player that never jump.
Yep.
And I had a quick look this morning because I want to be ready for this kind of question, of course. And that our libero, during I looked and I reviewed all the games of our season. So and looking at the accumulated acceleration load, I asked to KINEXON the ranking of the top threes, and that the third player with the higher accumulated acceleration load is the libero. Okay,
that's awesome. No, that's a great finding. So
if you would like to, go in deep about this, I would suggest this paper made by the author is Libero. I hope is Portuguese. I hope the pronunciation is right. Published on Sports Cell 2025 on January, I think. And the title starts with Beyond the Jump. And it's quite interesting because it's a nice paper who focus on the need to go in deep about the external training load in volleyball, which is, I mean, of course, jumps are the most demanding activity that our players do, but it's not only about the jumps, and it's not only about the sagittal movement activities. So it's quite interesting about that. And of course, the Libero role is one of the, I mean, is the most underrated role. So we need to pay attention to this.
No, I love that. Yeah. So if you have that link actually to the paper, please send me that.
Yeah,
we can
I will.
talk about that afterwards. But we'll put that in the show notes for our audience to follow up on that. But wanted to circle real quick back on what you said there, because I think it's really interesting. The Libero obviously having a different role, but you said like they're very high up still on your ranking for the accumulated acceleration load, but he's not jumping as much. So clearly his role and his movement profile looks different in a game, but also in a practice in terms of what he is doing. So how would you, maybe for that specific use case, how would you describe the most demanding scenarios for those players differently? You mentioned obviously everyone has the overall load over multiple games in a week, and that's probably the majority or like the biggest factor that goes into it. But if we look more at a singular session, like a game, for example, an intense practice, what do you think where the difference is? Is it really just the jumps, or like how would you describe the most demanding profiles scenarios for Libero, but then also compared to another players? What are some of those movements that you're seeing there?
Of course, if you watch a game, you can clearly see that the Libero is living his work life on squat position, and they are ready to sprint in every direction. I don't know how many times they need to decelerate, doing things or doing reception or doing defense or doing everything regarding his role. So it's a very demanding role, the Libero position. So I try to, and this happened thanks to KINEXON, because thanks to the device, we have the opportunity to show what we are seeing and what we are not seeing. And of course, this is important to ask to the coach for a day off or training reduction or specific attention on about a player for a Libero. For every other athlete, of course, we need to take care about the number of jumps, but not only what happened today or what happened yesterday, but in a more longer way. So because if we ask to the coach, to the teammates, to everyone, how was the practice of today? I mean, I think everyone can understand. But if you ask, how was yesterday? I think a few answers are modified by a few bias. But if you ask, how was 5 days ago, 10 days ago? It's not easy to remember and to know how was. And my main focus is to take care about the fatigue and the cumulative way and the cumulative aspect of the sum of day by day activity, which is crazy.
Are you? I mean, a typical concept in that regard would be the acute to chronic workload ratio. I mean, you can think about that what you want, right? I think they're like different people thinking differently about how helpful the concept is, but like just generally what you're describing, kind of comparing the chronic workload and the fatigue that you accumulate over multiple weeks compared to what you're doing this week or maybe also in a single session. is that something that you're looking at specifically in a certain way? Are you comparing a certain time range there? 3-4 weeks, kind of like the
Yes,
typical ranges, or like how are you doing that?
Very easy. We have a spreadsheet where we collect the daily information, and we do the math, we do the sum. Very, very easy. And you can easily you can easily see that day by day, week by week, and you realize that at the end of the month they are doing crazy numbers. So, but this is important because if you are facing a very tough period with a very important games, and you know that a few players need to be ready, it's not easy to remember everything about the player. So yes, I had this, so I will do this. With our rhythm is not possible with 14 players.
Yeah. Would you also say, like, looking at that load distribution, kind of like total workload that you have to do? You obviously mentioned that sometimes you're playing more sets in one game than in other games, depending on how tight the game is. But do you think that's the main driver for the load, just like the duration of the game? Or also do you see significant differences in terms of like when you're playing against better teams, right? Do you see, like, if you play the first two teams in the national competition, do you see a significant higher load and intensity in those games? Or also, you mentioned Champions League, obviously. Do you see differences there, or is it relatively similar and more driven by, okay, are we playing 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets, depending on what that looks like?
This is not an easy question. So I think the best way to answer is that the more apart the score can be 3-0. Win or loss, doesn't matter. But if the game is really tough means that the long rally, a lot of defense, I think the accumulated acceleration load at the end of the game, you find a high score. I've seen. So it's very related and connected to the intensity of the game, apart the score, because you can have a 3-0, 3-1, 1 hour 30, 1 hour 45, but you can have a very, very, very demanding game.
Okay. So it's not only the duration, it's actually more of the specificity of
the longer, the harder. But it's not only about the duration. It's about the tactical decision, because if the plan is to use more one player, you have you buy unbalanced feature of the game, because of course volleyball is not repetitive, is unpredictable, is a very tactical, and the level of preparation made by the coaches is so high. So you can have every game is a different story.
Yeah, no, I understand. With the data that we already talked about, so you mentioned obviously the different metrics that you're collecting within KINEXON. Are there any other, besides kind of like the subjective feedback that you're getting from the players, are there any other data points that you're looking into? Are you doing any like force play testing, or like any stuff like that to supplement also kind of like the data perspective, or is KINEXON the only piece that you're looking at from a data collection?
So at the moment, KINEXON was the only device that we use. We use to collect subjective data, of course, and we will introduce the VALD force platform the next season, the coming season. Yeah.
Okay. Any special considerations in that regard? Were you already looking forward to like how you want to maybe compare or implement the data together?
I think growing up, and the more I know, the more we can individualize the work with the strength conditioning coach and the head coach. I think this is crucial for our activity, which is, as I've said many times, is very demanding because we play every 3 days. It's tough to recover. It's tough to push with the weights room in the weights room. It's tough to push in the practice for the players. So we need to have I would say the good amount of information without having too many too many things to take care, and we don't have time to take care of everything. But of course, I think we strongly believe that individualized program is the way to keep the player healthy for the entire season.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I'm 100% with you there. Is there like and you don't have to name any names, but like, is there like a specific story or like best practice or use case that comes to mind where using the data, KINEXON, but then also the subjective feedback that you got in addition to it, where it helped you to make a better decision, or like a certain scenario where you said like, oh, glad we had a second look at the data to make a different decision or whatever. Any story that you can share with the audience there?
I have many stories to share, but I think that from my point of view, the most important thing is on the return to play process. Okay. Because having the opportunity to monitor the accumulated acceleration load during the activities or training without jumps is very important for us to having an idea and mix it up with the polar system in order to check the heart rate and to be sure that our player is well conditioned during the practice. And for example, last season we had a surgery, a knee surgery of one of our players. So the return to jump process, which is for us it's one of the most important time of our rehabilitation process. So having the guide of KINEXON about the amount of jumps and the quality of jumps and the intensity of jumps is important. Was crucial for two main reasons. The first is to create a strong relationship with the athlete, because at the end of every practice, we had the opportunity to review the data. So this is the plan. This is what we have done. So everything is okay. But at the same time, it's important when the player is ready to come back with the team, because we have the data prior the injury. So we knew that the player was able to jump 75 centimeters, and he used to jumps 100 times per practice. So we know what is the threshold that allow us to say, hey, head coach, we are ready to start with the first part of 6-on-6. Why? Because we are sure that everything is made in the right way.
Okay. Yeah. So looking back at the baseline or the individual player profile that we talked about in the beginning, that you established at the beginning of the season, and they get injured, and then you kind of like progressively bring them back to that threshold or benchmark that you mentioned, to then allow them to participate again in full practice. Okay.
Yep.
Do you see any differences there also between injuries, where you maybe look at different metrics, or where you would say, obviously if it's I would imagine like if it's a lower limb injury, right, that would probably impact the jumping more so, or are you in other cases more looking towards the accumulated acceleration load? Maybe if there's like a cardiovascular thing, or if they've been sick, are you kind of like differentiating there between what metrics you're looking at depending on what injury they have?
Yes, it depends on what injury. of course, in volleyball, we work with the jumping athletes. And the jumping athletes means jumper's knee. So everything around the patellar tendon and the knee extensor mechanism, of course, is our main is the feature that we take care as much as we can. It's not only about how many jumps, but also the quality of the jumps, because if one of our players lose 5 centimeters of jumps, for us it's a problem, because the level, the European level of volleyball is so high, so competitive. So if you reduce your performance, maybe you need to manage the number of jumps. So we need to reduce the jumps in order to let the player jump a little bit higher, but for less times.
Yeah. So managing the intensity, or as you said, I really like the way you phrased that, the quality of the jump over the quantitative output. So if you can give us 50 really, really good jumps where you get to your peak performance or to your max jump height, to like 98% of your jump height, probably is more helpful for us than doing 75 or 100 jumps that are just mediocre and maybe are only in the 70 to 75%, because likely in those, I would imagine we may be losing a point because you get blocked. Whereas like if you get to your 95, 98% of max jump height and you can really attack well, you actually make the point because you jump higher as the opponent. So I really like how you phrase that from a quality over quantity perspective, which is probably true in many ways, or in other cases as well. Where do you see things go in volleyball? And I mean, you can also take a general approach in sport with the sport tech, but where do you see things go in volleyball specifically with sports tech? What would be the next step? Or like, also let's phrase that differently actually. Where do you see the future of the sport go in terms of sport tech? But then also at the same time, what do you wish, what would you like to have? Let's say it that way, as a next thing.
I mean, I think for me it's important having a right amount of information about the lower limb, but at the same time of the upper limb, because shoulder is the dominant shoulder is so important for the volleyball player. So I think we need to improve in that way, having the opportunity to easily collect information around the shoulders. We have the opportunity to do something like that indirectly, not directly, using our scouting guys, because they are able to help us with these pieces of information. And I wish to find an increasing number of colleagues, strength and conditioning coaches, head coaches, so educated, informed, and so open to the data. Because data, I think, this is a personal opinion, can make the difference. I really believe this. And it's not only a signal to stop people, because too many times data are seen like the data, the number is this, you need to stop. That's, I think, as I told you, this is a mistake from my point of view. Because data, if you measure day by day, you are able to, I would say, control, but you can increase the control of your activity, I'm sure. But of course, I need the cooperation and collaboration of the entire team.
Yeah. Um, with that specifically, like where, yeah, so you mentioned two things there. One, the education and kind of like raising the level from an educational perspective and how we use data, but then also on the other hand, um, as a specific example, looking at lower limb versus upper limb. So two follow-up questions for you there. One, with the lower and the upper limb tracking or evaluation, or however you want to call that, have you seen any technologies yet that cover that, or is that something that you see as like completely new where yeah, it's an open field here?
No, I never seen any kind of technology about the upper limb, and I've never tried nothing. But I think, I mean, for us, it's important to counting the number of jumps, but at the same time, it's important to counting the number of spikes, of the dominant shoulder. Yeah, this is important because if you have a shoulder problem, so it's exactly the same. So we have a nice talk about jumps, cumulative acceleration load, but for the upper limb, it's exactly the same. We change only the name of the joint, but it's exactly the same. And I think what's the second part of the question?
No, I only asked the first question. The second question was due towards the educational part. But yeah, I was wondering how you would track just the upper limb, lower limb thing. I think what you said just was interesting with the.
I think having an idea of the spike counts with a very light device by camera. I don't know. I need someone more prepared to help me, because of course everything around the shoulder can be bothering for the player. So something that it's easy and non-invasive for the player, but are able to detect the number of spike and the speed, of course, the speed of the upper limb. And for the lower limb, I think that now KINEXON is is the best. The best because we have even if we have the IMU system, but we are able to provide a very, very, very high quality rehabilitation, return to play process, and training load monitoring of our athletes. I'm sure 100%. I've tried many systems, but KINEXON for me has a very good interface with the software, so it's very easy to use, very easy to be. So quite often we show the monitor to the player, and the player are able to understand immediately what we are talking about. So the visual interface so easy to understand by everyone.
Yeah, the ease of use. Now I'm obviously glad to hear that, because then we're doing something right. Now thank you for the feedback. Really appreciate that. That's obviously great to hear. Going back to just what you said there for a second again, I think it's really interesting because it plays to what you said earlier too. I think with the sensor-based tracking that you're doing right now, you're getting a good idea, obviously, of the volume and intensity of the jumps. Now you could argue a lot of the jumps, but not all, could correlate to also upper body movement, right? With the arms, with the spikes. Obviously, there are other jumps also that are related to blocks, so that's obviously a different motion. So you could probably get a rough estimate just based on the jumps that you're doing on how many upper body movements that you're doing as well. But then going back to a point that you made earlier, it's also not just about the quantity, but about the quality of the movement. So identifying and evaluating the intensity of a block, or more importantly, even a spike, because that's where you have that rapid follow through with the arm and through the shoulder. It's very interesting. I think there are some technologies out there, and something that we are also looking at KINEXON in the basketball space is with computer vision. So using video-based tracking tools And I know there are other technologies out there that even look deeper into the biomechanical aspects of it. So really looking at different segments of the limb and how the acceleration and speed of those happen. So I would imagine there's probably a good space in volleyball where people could look at that, and maybe that's also something we will evaluate in the future. But that sounds like a very interesting aspect for sure. So appreciate you sharing that.
Especially for the development of the young players. So they need a very dedicated attention during the adolescence. So I think this can be very, very, very useful in that people.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because is that something actually where you see a lot of issues with in terms of like talent and player or long-term athlete development, where people tend to in volleyball to get overuse injuries? Because something that I've seen like over the last 8 years that I've been in the US, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out all the details in baseball. I know that's for European people difficult to understand sport. Like after all those years, I have a good grasp of what's happening, but it was definitely a little bit more difficult at the beginning. But what I've learned there and what I heard a lot is that pitching motion where you kind of like throw the ball and then you get a lot of elbow issues, right? And with early specializations, especially in the youth, where they focus even earlier on trying to become professional and kind of like play on a higher level. Is that something that you see in volleyball with youth development and early specialization as well, that the earlier they specialize, they tend to get more problems with the rotatory cuff and their shoulder?
Yes, rotator cuff, low back pain, knees are really affected on the young players, men's and female, both. And maybe I don't know the training. The training feature or the different physical level. Of course, if you are under 14, under 15, you have the opportunity to play on the same team, but with a very different teammates by biological age. And of course, this can be challenging for your body if you want to compete at your best. So I think, a junior team has a special place in my mind because I think the technology now can really, really help to shape their future. Because if we talk about a very professional athlete, it's not easy. Trust me, it's not easy to change something on the biomechanical motion during the spiking, during the approach, during the reception, just because we have seen something on the data. It's not easy because if we work, we have the pleasure and we have the opportunity to work with the most important athletes in the world. So they know how to play volleyball, they know how to play basketball, they know how to solve a very difficult task. But if you work with the young player, you have the opportunity to give them the best in order to be good, but at the same time doing the things good in weight room. And I think the technology can be crucial if we extend everything around the body motion within the weights room. But I think and I hope the future will be like this with the technology in sports.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying something really important there. I think obviously the resources that we have on a professional level are different than in youth sports, but looking at the whole concept of sport and player long-term athlete development, it seems even more crucial to also invest into youth sports, and not necessarily saying that we need to provide all the technologies there as well. But I think going back to your point that you heard earlier, from an even at least educational perspective, right? Because even if it's at the beginning that you're counting the jumps, you're getting some objective data. And even if there is some subjective flaws to it because you miscount or whatever, but you at least have some reference on what you're doing, and if you're educated on that aspect of like volume, intensity, and how you structure training and how you prioritize it, it helps you maybe avoid some of those issues, especially in youth development. And just being more conscious, I think, is what you're also saying about what are we exposing our youth athletes to, with in mind we don't need to compete and be our best at 14, but we want to set them up for a long, healthy life, and then also being able to compete once they go professional and don't kind of like burn them in the early stages.
And another thing is that we need to use, I think this is my opinion, we need to use the technology to increase the knowledge about few topics. But we need to keep in mind that when we try to translate what does the research say into the weights room, we generally use data from male, because I work with female athlete. So the data regarding the female athlete are, I mean, I try to be kind, are not enough. So when we use data and we try to translate something, read on the literature, generally make a mistake, because we use the data collected on male population and we try to use this data with the female population. I don't think, I think we can do something better. But of course, we need time, we need research, and we need technology to perform high-level research, I'm sure.
Yeah, very, very good point. I'm sure it's not only in volleyball, but I mean, we've seen it across all sports that research in female sports is unfortunately heavily underrepresented, and it's almost another topic in itself. We could probably talk for a long while. Because it's so important. And I know like there has been some project that we've been working on at KINEXON also with the cycle tracking and being more specific on how that all affects also practice and availability for games and practices. So it's definitely another topic I think we need to do more work on also from our technology side, on how we can customize different aspects of the data that we're presenting, thinking about, for example, thresholds, and obviously a jump threshold or an intensity threshold for accumulated acceleration load should probably look different in a volleyball use case for women than it looks for men. So being conscious about that and trying to do more research in those different areas. So we have some starting points there, but I definitely hear you also that that will be a big part. Kai, to come to the end here of the podcast episode, this was a lot that we talked about. One last thing that I want to ask you on the educational piece is, and this is twofold. So one, you mentioned obviously earlier that you've been working with Siena also in the EuroLeague. I don't know if you crossed path with Costas, who worked at Fenerbahce and now comes to Milan. So he, and I'm curious, he really worked on the European Strength and Conditioning Coach Association for basketball. And he does a lot of educational pieces around technology and how can we educate better. I'm wondering, is there like a similar European group also in volleyball where you come together and share that education that you talked about, or is that something
not yet? I think it's something very, very interesting, and it's something that we, as a volleyball people, we would need.
Okay. yeah, so maybe you can be the first one to bring it to life. Now, but I think it's a very important aspect. I think just giving a shout out to them in the EuroLeague basketball space. I think they did a great job. But I would imagine something similar like that would be very helpful to talk more about these aspects that we talked about: player development, long-term athlete development, difference female, man. For sure. Uh, so now really last question for you. If you mentioned your mentor, if you, and maybe we can bring him on the podcast, but do you have anyone that you would recommend bringing on the podcast that would be interesting to talk about, learn more on the volleyball space that you can recommend for our audience?
I mean, from sports technology point of view, I mean, me and my team are on board with KINEXON, thanks to one person, which is Vanni Miale, which is the strength conditioning coach of the Vakit Bank Istanbul Volleyball Club. So that's my name, because he was the first to introduce me about KINEXON, about the data and volleyball. So was I mean, that's my name, Vanni, no doubt.
Well, definitely reach out to him. Yeah, that he came up already in some of the conversations. We'll have to follow up with him on doing something. What would be so he recommended apparently KINEXON to you. What would be something that you, I mean, not KINEXON specifically, but for anyone starting out in the field, what would be something that you would recommend to people doing when they start out with the sport?
Sometimes when I have some doubt, I call and I speak with two people. The first one is Matteo Paniti, which is the strength conditioning coach of the men's basketball national team of Italy, and his assistant Tibiletti, Emanuele Tibiletti, is the guy who is working with the data.
Yeah, well, maybe we can find them on social media. Put the names in the show notes as well for anyone interested to connect. And with that, I'm coming to the final question for you. What's the best way if people want to get in touch with you, if you're open to that, to connect with you, ask any more questions that they might have if they want to? Are you on social media, or like what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Not really. The best way is email. So my email is cencinisebastiano86@gmail.com.
I appreciate it a lot. We spoke for a while. I feel like we could have gotten even deeper into the topic and even speak for a little bit longer here. Really appreciate you, Sebastiano, taking the time today, speaking with me about your experience over the years and how you use data at Scandicci. And yeah, I want to give you the final words.
So thank you so much for the invitation. Thanks to KINEXON for the support with the team, and thank you again for having me.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And as we said in the beginning, follow us on social media, Instagram, or also LinkedIn, or subscribe and follow our podcast if you want to learn more about sport technology, innovation, and sports performance, and how KINEXON can help you. Until next time, Sebastiano and Phil here from KINEXON. Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Yeah.